Welcome to Uncovered. It's Wednesday. And you know what that means? It means it's time for Ron and I to spend an hour or so with you, or more like an hour and 38 minutes as it was last week, and really uncover that MAGA propaganda that's not covered by the mainstream and corporate media. We want to talk about the government shutdown. Of course, it's very important, it's very serious, and it's already underway. We'll do that in just a few minutes. Let's start, though, with a bit of late-breaking news. This comes out of this is on the Jeffrey Epstein subject, which is a subject that obviously Donald Trump is trying to distract from with multiple activities. And it's his own Howard Lutnick this time who's kind of bringing it up. What's going on here, Ron? Oh, you're muted still, my friend. Just hang on, let me unmute you. There you go. Okay, I've done it.
Before I get into that in too much detail,
Yep.
I want to explain that I had several injuries in the Marine Corps,
Yes.
different times. One of them was a dental injury, and I had a crown put on my tooth, which came out a few days ago, and I'm not able to get it fixed yet. I'm waiting for my root canal. So I am missing one front tooth, which maybe make it difficult for me to pronounce certain words, but I will do my best.
Okay.
Well, without one tooth for a couple of weeks.
Well, we're here for you. Good luck saying Hegseth over and over again. But I think
That's
it's
a tough one,
right. I think you're going to be fine. You look great, so that's all that really matters.
Oh yes,
today.
thank you.
Yeah.
So the shutdown is a little frustrating to me because the two sides have been sort of talking past each other on what their relative positions are.
Yeah.
It really was started by Republicans, clearly Trump. In other words, what they started with was Trump started with two talking points. Democrats want to shut down the government to fund trans surgeries and give free health care to illegals, right? So the trans thing they dropped pretty quickly because that was nonsense. But the illegal thing is what they're all in on now. And that is their talking point. You know, Democrats want to fund healthcare for illegals. So for a while there, I was a little frustrated that Democrats weren't really responding. Then they finally did, and now they are definitely responding. But they're not really taking the problem head on. They're simply responding by saying, that's a lie. It's not true. That's not happening, which is not completely accurate. There is a kernel of truth in the Republican argument. And I think that Democrats would be more effective, especially since people like Vance and others are talking about this constantly today and will be until the shutdown is resolved. I think it's important for Democrats to take on that kernel of truth and explain it instead of just saying, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. Because really what it is that the Affordable Care Act subsidies, the subsidies that help people pay their premiums on their health insurance, which would be taken away at the end of the year, will result in premiums skyrocketing as much as 75% for a minimum of 22 million people. That's Americans, right?
Yeah.
So that is what Democrats are really fighting for here. And, you know, the Johnson-Thune argument is, well, we have plenty of time. As we know with Johnson, the House is not in session very often while he's been speaker, you know, a couple days a month. So he always procrastinates, wait till the last minute. Plus open enrollment begins for health insurance November 1st. So there isn't a lot of time. So I understand why Democrats want to get this done now. The argument about the illegals is this, that, and it's extremely complicated issue, but what Republicans did when they passed their big, beautiful bill is they put in a lot of criteria seeking to take away funding for emergency hospital care from people with temporary protected status. In other words, it's not illegal. See, when they use the word illegal, they're talking about people who have temporary protected status and people who don't. They're lumping them all into one big pot. So when they say illegal, what I would like Democrats to do and media to do when they ask them these questions is to separate out, okay, when you say illegal aliens, that are getting funding, okay, for healthcare, you are talking about not all of them. You are talking about the smaller number that has temporary protective status. They have been granted temporary protective status by the government, and their asylum claims are still pending. Those people, after a waiting period, are eligible for under the Affordable Care Act. And some of them, until they can get health insurance, do show up at emergency rooms. And Republicans put in a whole set of rules where, show me your papers before hospitals can treat somebody, even if they're bleeding out or seriously injured. The Republicans put in all these rules that hospitals may not get reimbursed by the government if they treat somebody in that scenario, unless they first establish that they have temporary protected status. So it's very complicated. The bottom line is what Republicans are doing is taking this massive pot of money that is to the benefit of tens of millions of Americans and arguing that Democrats are only fighting for that for a small handful of migrants who have temporary protected status and who qualify for the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
So
we should remind people, though, that in the main, undocumented immigrants are ineligible for federal health insurance programs, Medicare, Medicaid, Children's Health Insurance Program. They can't buy health care programs on the government exchanges set up by the Affordable Care Act. They can't receive any subsidies. And that's that's the law as it is. But as you describe, why let the truth get in the way of a good argument, right? And so,
well, it's easier to just say Democrats want to give free health care to illegals. Yeah. And that is a complete lie.
Yeah.
I wish Democrats would also, though, sort of take on the truth part of it, which is to say, okay, there is reimbursements for some small hospitals. There is a pot of money for that, who do treat people who have temporary protected status in the emergency rooms. And if you didn't reimburse many of these small rural hospitals, they would go out of business, and which would hurt a lot of Americans. So there is a smaller, much smaller pot of money that goes to that. And I don't think Democrats should be afraid of talking about that and saying, yes, that's there, and explain the reasons why that's there, instead of just saying you're lying. Say, okay, yes, you're lying, but let me take on what I think you're talking about here and explain to people what that is. So I think we're getting there. I heard the press conference today in the House, and I was encouraged that it wasn't.
I was too.
I was encouraged that it wasn't just Jeffries and Schumer.
Who was that guy? I didn't recognize him. The guy who was kind of leading it, he was very eloquent representing the Democrats.
I saw Catherine Clark speak.
Okay, I only caught like 3 or 4 minutes of it, but the guy who I saw, I didn't get his name, but I thought, hang on a second, like, where did you come from? I'll look it up when we're in the break.
And the reason is because, like, you see the contrast. People say, well, why are you down on Schumer, Jeffries? What can they do? Every time you see somebody else be the face of the Democrats and speak on some of these issues, that question gets answered. Why you're so frustrated with Schumer? Because there are so many other people that do a much better job communicating these things than those two.
Yeah. And it's no disrespect to the work that they do or their legacy, but communication is key. And this is where Republicans have the edge, because they're just really good at this stuff. And to the detriment of the American people. Let's look at a quick clip of MAGA Mike Johnson, as we like to call him, kind of trying to deal with this issue.
Just need a little more time, because tonight is the end of the fiscal year. Chuck Schumer has refused to give the extra time. Why? Because we won't agree to restore health care to illegal aliens. Because we won't agree to give $500 million back to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. He wants to cut the big fund of $50 billion that we set aside to support and prop up rural hospitals in America, because we won't agree to those partisan demands. And $1.5 trillion in new spending on a 7-week stopgap funding measure he's decided to shut the government down. It's real pain for real Americans, and it's so frustrating.
I heard you make that first point at the White House yesterday after the meeting y'all had with the president and with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. People, as you know, people who are here in the United States legally have never been eligible for the Obamacare subsidies, for Medicare, for Medicaid. So what exactly are you saying that they're trying to do when you talk about giving free health care to them?
I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so when we passed the One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Families Tax Cut, we had Medicaid reforms in the bill. You and I talked about it on the air. What we did was to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. There were a lot of people on the program who were enrolled in the program who were never eligible to be there. Medicaid is intended for eligible U.S. citizens, not illegal aliens, not also U.S. citizens who are able-bodied workers like young men. So we passed the law. The president signed it into law. Democrats voted against it, of course, and it's been wildly successful. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, which is the neutral arbiter of all these things, released a report a few weeks ago, earlier this month, and they said, you know what? The bill has had its intended purpose. Premiums are coming down, listen, because 2.3 million ineligible enrollees have been kicked off of Medicaid, which helps to save the program, prop it up. And $185 billion has been saved already in fraud, waste, and abuse.
Do you think he knows he's lying, or is he so kind of caught up in their talking points that he's just saying it anyway?
No, he knows he's lying. He's being deceptive because he's conflating different issues.
Yeah.
You know, he's combining what the Democrats are fighting for is the Affordable Care Act premium subsidies. The amount of money, in other words, if you had to pay the full premium, if all Americans had to pay the full premium, that's a hard thing for me to say without my tooth, their premiums will go through the roof. And many of them will be forced to cancel their health insurance. So we'll be right back to where we were before Obamacare. So really what I think is happening here is Republicans have always been looking for a way to do away with Obamacare since they couldn't have the votes to repeal Obamacare, and that would have been wildly unpopular. They're chewing away at it around the edges. They're taking chunks of it out, one piece at a time. And this is one big way to undercut Obamacare, is to let this lapse. And so when he starts bringing up all these other things, the illegals, and what else did he throw in there? Funding for something else he threw in, and talking about 1.2 trillion. That's not what Democrats are arguing for. That he's doing what Republicans do constantly, especially Vance, which is creating a fictitious position.
Yep.
And saying this is what Democrats are arguing,
which this is
when they are not arguing that.
Yeah, but this is a messaging problem on behalf of the Democrats, because if the Democrats are not speaking up enough and controlling the narrative, and the other side is rewriting the narrative on their behalf, then it's not difficult to know that that's their strategy and that's how they operate. So you have to counter it. Again, it's like a lack of a war room or a lack of any kind of immediate response to this propaganda. Well, it's very frustrating.
When they first started this, which was about a week ago, when they came out with the messaging, and I know the people who create the messaging. I follow them. I watch them closely. And when they first put out the talking point, Democrats want to shut down the government to give free health care to illegals. That's the talking. It's very simple. It's clean. It's elegant. Yep. It's a simple lie.
Yep.
Democrats want to shut down the government unless we agree to give free health care to illegals, right? So, yes. And so about 3 days went by of Republicans repeating this mantra over and over and over, all of them, Fox. And at one point I just said, are any Democrats going to actually address this?
Right.
And talk about this.
Right.
And then, it was finally like the next day I started seeing a few did, and then a few more. Thankfully, like today, they're all taking on the lie for the most part, but it took a week, and a week is an eternity in this news cycle. Mm-hmm. And they let Republicans get the jump on them on that messaging, and they're not letting up. So, but I do think the Democrats are now doing a good job countering those arguments, but it's kind of, a little late again.
So what is your prediction for how this is going to play out? Because he's not calling them back in this week. They could have come back in on Friday, but that's now not happening. They're talking about Monday potentially having the kind of recalling Congress for this?
Well, the Senate's voting every day. They voted again today. It was the same vote.
Yep.
So the Senate is going to continue to vote every single day. The House apparently is just going to sit back and he doesn't want to reconvene the House because of Epstein too.
Yeah.
Let's not forget. I mean, there is a Democratic rep in Arizona who won in a landslide over a week ago, and he refuses to swear her in because she is the final 218th signature on the Epstein petition. And so there's multiple things that have to happen. First, she has to get sworn in. He's refusing to do that. Second, she has to sign the petition. Third, 7 days have to go by. Then you have 2 days to vote on it. So it really is like 9 days. So he's delaying each step of the process again, as long as he possibly can. And so that's why one of the reasons why the House is not in session right now and wasn't in session throughout the entire month of August into September is all because of Epstein. And so what they're doing is they're forcing votes in the House, hoping that to peel off more Democrats, although they got to peel off 5, which is a lot. And so likely you're going to keep getting the same vote totals. How does this end? I don't see Senate Dems caving. I mean, they thought since they had some defections that there was a chance they were going to cave. But let's not forget, Rand Paul voted with the Democrats on this too. The Democrats lost like Fetterman and a few others, but not many.
Chuck came up for a lot of criticism last time he kind of let it go, and now we shouldn't forget that he eventually kind of sided with them to not shut the government down. And the talk really in Democratic circles is that he was too weak on that. So do you think that the fact that he's been through that means he's going to stand his ground this time?
Well, I think so. I mean, there's just no way, and I guess they asked AOC jokingly the other day if this shutdown is because of her, because she's a likely threat to him in the next Democratic primary in New York for Senate. Justifiably so. I hope she runs, and if she runs, I will support her. I'll tell you that right now.
Sure.
I think a lot of Democrats would. But so that's looming over Chuck. Sure. And so he certainly can't surrender without getting anything in return. So what I hope that the only pathway I see for this getting resolved is if Democrats just narrow it to one issue, the Affordable Care Act subsidies, nothing else. They don't add any little bells and whistles or little add-ons or, pet projects or anything to that. They stick to one issue, which is an issue that the American people support, and fight for that issue and nothing else, and streamline and stick to their guns on that one issue. I think if they do that, they can win the shutdown, because ultimately the question is, who do the American people going to hold responsible for this? And the American people are not like us. They're not like people watching this show, on most of them. They're not plugged into all the issues. And the bottom line is this is going to hurt the economy, which is already in bad shape. It's going to hurt jobs. It's going to hurt a lot of different sectors. And the American people understand this. They don't understand all the little nuances of what we've been talking about, but they understand this. Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, the House, and the Supreme Court. Democrats control nothing. So ultimately, when they go to vote next year, they're going to blame this on the Republicans.
And the extreme language that Trump's been using, as you alluded to earlier, where he was saying, the Democrats, they're still for transgender for everyone, which is a phrase I'll never understand the definition of.
We're all going to be trans. We all want to be transgender.
Exactly. But that language is so ridiculous that even people who are not kind of clued into politics will recognize that nobody, including Democrats, is going to insist that everybody becomes transgender. But Trump has become so, increasingly compromised mentally that he doesn't even realize that what he's saying it makes no sense. And that is a problem for the Republicans, certainly.
Yeah. And then we have to add in another factor, which is taking off in the last 24 hours, which is Russ Vought, the budget director,
Yeah.
who has been preparing for this for years.
Right. And he's getting name-checked a lot more.
He had
now,
a plan.
isn't he?
Yeah, he had a plan, and he is executing that plan. And it's a plan on multiple fronts. But what this is going to do, I think, Russ doesn't care about politics. He's a right-wing technocrat. He doesn't think, he's sort of like Lutnick. Those guys don't think about the political implications of what they do. They are policy guys. They have certain things they want to accomplish policy-wise, and they don't really run the calculus of like a Susie Wiles would do, which is, how is this going to play in this race or that race or what? They don't think about that. They don't care about that. So now you've got bull in a China shop Vought, who is going to punish Democrats for the shutdown by, as Trump said, firing tens of thousands of civil servants. Trump said specifically targeting registered Democrats who are civil servants.
Yeah.
Although, Vance, who was it, Vance or Mike Johnson? Vance said, oh, no, that's not true. We're not doing that. He said that today. Well, It's like Trump just said it yesterday that he was going to target Democrats. And Vance like, oh, no, we're not doing that. We wouldn't do something like that. Well, then you have Vought today who is taking away funding for a transportation system that links up New York and New Jersey 1 month before the New Jersey governor's election, which is neck and neck. He's going to pull the rug out from under the Republican candidate, also pull the rug out from under Andrew Cuomo in the New York City mayor's race, who the Trump White House is backing. I mean, and then he announces he's going to take away $8 billion in renewable energy funding, but only for Democratic states. He listed like a dozen states, all blue states. But guess what? Those 12 or 13 blue states that he's going to pull funding from have a lot of Republican Congress people in there, in those states, that he's screwing over. It makes me think, like, did he talk to Susie Wiles? Did he talk to the political side of the House before he put all these tweets out about pulling funding?
But this exposes who's pulling the strings, because we've often said that Russ Vought, who's a Project 2025 guy, a Heritage Foundation guy, and of course that new statistician who replaced the woman that Trump fired is also another of these operatives.
But they dumped him yesterday.
Oh, they dumped him, did they?
Yeah, they pulled his nomination because he had all this Nazi stuff in his in his background. Yeah, they yanked him yesterday.
You mean he hadn't hidden the Nazi stuff as well as some of the others?
He didn't hide it well enough.
That's more like.
So now they're looking for a third.
Right. Somebody who's a little more careful about their past. But the point I'm making is that, I've often said that what we're looking at with this cast of characters are certainly with Trump and Mike Johnson, is that they are just doing what they're told. So who are the people pulling the strings? Who are the puppet masters? And this goes back, of course, to the oligarchs, to those people that helped Trump get elected, and certainly the foundation and Project 2025 people. And so, we're really starting to see that now that they're in government, they have no intention of leaving government. So much of this,
they're not acting like they're leaving.
Right. That's the point. I mean,
yeah.
The ballroom, which is all Trump seems to care about, I mean, he ain't building that thing and leaving. It's the only thing he seems to get excited about these days is that frickin' thing.
And let's not forget, when he has his meeting with Schumer and Jeffries, he put Trump 2028 hats out on a table.
Everywhere. Right.
For a photo op. And in fact, what we learned after from Jeffries was that they were in the middle of the meeting. There was no cameras. There was no reporters for once.
Yeah.
And aides brought those hats in the middle of the meeting and put them around the room and took photos. So that was, again, we talked about why, you go in there, and we saw him when he did that to Whitmer, the same kind of deal.
Yes.
Where, when you go in there, he's going to use, they always have a plan to use you somehow as a prop for some
sabotage
thing they're going to pull.
Every time.
This was supposed to be a closed door, no cameras, no reporters meeting, negotiation. And in the middle of it, an aide comes in with Trump 2028 hats and puts them around the room and starts taking photos of Jeffries and Schumer with the Trump 2028 hats in the background.
Yeah. And Trump sitting in a way as if he was like bullying them.
Yeah.
And this is a huge problem, because again, this is the advantage that Republicans have. They are so on this stuff. They know how to make things go viral. They know what a great image is. I mean, remember the time Trump got shot? And then you saw the photographers running in and the aides pushing the photographers in to get that fight picture, and then the flag put in the background. I mean, this is the propaganda
working at
of
the McDonald's,
right?
Him going to the Chick-fil-A. I mean,
right.
They are so good at this stuff. I mean, we documented this is a production. This is a theater production.
Right.
Highly sophisticated messaging production.
So in answer to your point, who cares about the politics? It's not about politics for them anymore. This is about the production. It's about sowing the seeds of Trump's. Right. His next presidency, 2028.
Well, you have competing interests here, because you're right. Like, Stephen Miller does not care about the politics of anything that he does. Elon Musk doesn't care. Russ Vought doesn't care. Most of the people named Hegseth doesn't care. But who does care are members of Congress, Republicans that want to hold on to the House and Senate. They care. So this is the conflict here, which is the Trump White House doesn't care about the political implications of anything they do these days. They're just doing things that just for power grabs, to consolidate power
as much as possible.
And you have Republicans in Congress who are terrified of Trump and who are afraid to speak up, but they are the ones getting hurt by many of these things.
Yes.
And so at some point, there's going to be some breaking point here where they're either just going to continue to say nothing and all get voted out, or they're going to finally speak up, because what the Trump White House is doing is going to cost many of them their seats.
This is also further evidence that the likelihood of a fair election is more and more unlikely, because that's the way Trump and his people are behaving.
The worse it looks for them in 2026, and the economy is in the toilet right now, the more likely it is that they're going to do something. And
Gavin Newsom knows this. I mean, he's not shy about talking about it, and certainly about 2028. And Adam Schiff and a few others, they're saying this stuff out loud, but we need to hear it from the Senate leaders, and we need to hear it it needs to be a talking point like the Republicans do. It needs to be issued. This is the line. The line is Trump is never going to leave office, and make people aware of that.
It was interesting to hear Newsom say the other day that Trump is putting National Guard troops into blue states, and Pritzker said this too. To try and intimidate voters in the midterms. I mean, it's something that we have said before in the past, but I have not heard that from any senior Democratic leaders. But Pritzker and Newsom both said it this week, which was good.
It's so hard, isn't it? Because there's so much, and this is the Bannon thing of flooding the zone with all of this shit. And unfortunately, it's like, which shit are you gonna choose? I'm of the opinion that you should go with everything. There's enough Democrats to be talking about it. They should be talking about all the issues all of the time, and don't allow things to rest, because Mike Johnson he's a little weasel, that guy, isn't he? But he really is very good at making it sound simple. He says things like, "Oh, I'm pleased you asked me that." Well, it's really simple. It's this. And that's
what blows me away. It's like he's supposed to be this pious Christian guy, but he lies so effortlessly. You would think, like, a lot of people who are really devout, like, you can almost see the pain on their face when they have to lie to cover things up. You can almost see the guilt there.
Mm-hmm.
But with Mike Johnson, like, there's none of that. Like, it just rolls
because
right
they're
off his
not
tongue.
Christians.
Effortlessly.
These people are not Christians. They tell us that they're Christians.
Yeah, he's a fake Christian.
But they're
I
fake
said
Christians.
that last night. Yeah.
Right. So, we need to also get our heads around that as well, because, God, unfortunately, no one wants to argue with God, but it needs to be called out. We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and get more into the Jeffrey Epstein thing, amongst others, and, of course, that war meeting that was called one of the most remarkable things I think I've ever seen. So
me too.
Right, we'll do that next here on Uncovered. This fall, Ponchos got you covered, with classics like denim and flannels to new styles like the Western polo and tough thread, comfortable, durable, and versatile for whatever the season brings. My favorite thing about Poncho's denim shirt is it has just the right amount of stretch to move with you. It has this soft, broken-in feel from day one with just the right stretch, and also has a good weight while being comfortable all day. It's Western styling that pairs with anything. Poncho offers free shipping and free returns. They also offer free exchanges to make sure you get the right fit. By the way, I love when brands actually listen to feedback and build what people are asking for. That's what Poncho did with the new Western Polo. Definitely check that one out, as it's one of my favorites. Poncho stands by every shirt, and they'll make it right if it's not your favorite. Gear up for fall with Poncho. Every piece is built for comfort, performance, and lasting style. Go to ponchoutdoors.com/uncovered and enter your email for $10 off your first order. That's PONCHO outdoors.com/uncovered for $10 off and free shipping. And when they ask how you heard about them, let them know Uncovered sent you. It really helps support the show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 40-plus states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks puts their users first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. Prize Picks also offers injury reboots. If one of your players leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks won't count it as a loss. Prize Picks is the best way to win cash this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your takes into cash all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code UNCOVERED to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code UNCOVERED to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. And you can find links to our sponsors in the description below. Okay, Ron, so we touched on this earlier, this notion that the reason that they don't want Congress in session is because they don't want to approve this new congressperson. Didn't she let me show you this post that she put up. I came to the Capitol ready to be sworn in and get to work for the people of Southern Arizona. Instead, Speaker Johnson chose to delay, denying our community the representation we deserve. And that's from Adelita. This, we kind of spoke briefly about the Epstein files, which is ongoing, and there was another kind of trove of materials was released by the Democrats recently. Just bring us up to speed with what we've heard this morning, because this is a kind of another twist to this story with Howard Lutnick.
Yeah, this is really kind of like a blockbuster little thing that he's sort of like more saying the quiet part out loud again. Went on New York Post main politics reporter Miranda Devine went on her podcast, and they started talking about Epstein because, again, right wingers are very interested about this subject too, not just us. The polls all show that. And he talked about being friends with him, hanging out, him and his wife being in Epstein's home. He mentioned Epstein telling him that, about his massage room and how he got whispered, "I get special massages," wink, wink. Tried to get Lutnick to partake. Lutnick says that he did not. I don't know. Take him at his word, I guess, on that. Certainly no evidence that he's in the files. But the bottom line is, like, he went through his MO and he said, this is how he made his fortune. He made his fortune blackmailing, talking about Epstein, blackmailing rich, powerful people by filming them with underage girls in the massage room. Many of them are married. Many of them CEOs of companies, et cetera, politicians, media people, whatever. And Lutnick says that's how he built his fortune, was through blackmail, which gives us a few more details on that. And so that was very interesting for him, sort of just to like lay it all out there, like this was his MO, because it really does show why Trump and Republicans in Congress are willing to suffer with their own supporters and in the polls on this issue and pay the political price to cover this stuff up, because it is obvious that many of them are implicated, and many of the people that they know. And even if it's not Trump, I mean, they say, oh, Trump is innocent. Okay, fine. But even if it's not him, even if he's not like directly, like he went into massage with underage girl, even if that's not in there, we know he's all over the files. We know he's friends with Epstein. And we know, according to Trump, because he said this many times, that many rich and powerful people would have their reputations destroyed if the files came out. And that Trump has said that. And that's why he thinks that is because of unjust accusations and it would be unfair. But the bottom line is they're covering this stuff up to protect some extremely powerful people that are obviously close to Trump and that Trump wants to protect very badly.
It really was an eye-opener to hear this come from Lutnick, because, it's almost like they're all involved. Like, is this like a West Palm Beach thing that anybody who kind of hangs out at Mar-a-Lago, becomes friends with Jeffrey Epstein, witnesses a bunch of stuff, is or isn't involved, and then eventually finds themselves working in the Trump administration?
Yeah, I mean, New York and Palm Beach, that's the connection.
Right. Yeah.
So you have a lot of these people that, that were living and working, and their families were in New York, but they had the second homes in Palm Beach, and they would go back and forth. And then, of course, there was the island. But I think people get overly distracted focusing on the island, because he was doing this stuff here in the United States, too. It wasn't just on the island.
Well, he was grooming people, ultimately. And that's why when you see some famous names on the flight logs, the manifests, he's effectively grooming people all the time to see who he can and can't get away with when he eventually introduces them to young girls, puts them in a room where he's got cameras or whatever the deal was, and then is able to blackmail them afterwards.
But you know what the other interesting thing is that he didn't just go after everyone. Obviously he's looking for rich, powerful people to blackmail, but he also seemed to target people that he thought would partake. It's like you don't just go to random people. You're looking for people who you think might be interested in this kind of activity. And obviously Donald Trump was one of those people. Howard Lutnick was one of those people, that he solicited. Whether they actually did it or not, I mean, the files will tell the story there. But the bottom line is a lot of people did. We know that for sure. Although, what makes it even more suspicious is when you have Bondi and Patel and Bongino coming out and saying nobody else partaked in this. No, it was just what, one person, Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein, and that's it. Nobody else did this stuff. I mean, that is just a preposterous lie. Everybody knows it's a lie. So again, it's the cover up is just making this worse. It's not going away. It continues to spiral. And then when the files do ever get released, most likely they're going to be just heavily redacted, which is going to cause more people to go crazy. So it's not going away.
I hadn't forgotten, but I have been reminded of how when Trump is in the White House, the amount of baggage that he brings with, the amount of controversy and scandal is it's just, aside from the Heritage Foundation's intentions that they have to make America white again and this, this white supremacy, aside from that, Trump brings all this other stuff with him from his past.
To that point, one thing that Republicans are correct about is basically like Democrats weren't talking about this issue until Trump got in the White House. That is true because and so to your point, if Trump had not won this election, none of this stuff would even be being brought up right now. None of this stuff would be talked about. But it was brought up and brought in because of Bongino and Patel.
Right.
They are the ones who brought this up in January and February that they were going to do this. And
so does that mean they were rewarded with these positions? Because this looks like another part of the playbook is that people who know stuff or say too much, you reward them with very powerful positions in government and hopefully by their silence.
And that really is what's happening. I mean, there's no way that they can keep their jobs if they want to release. If Patel was out there saying, yeah, I think we should release these files, he would be fired. He would be fired the next day. So we know that. So yeah, because and by the way, it's not like these guys can be fired and go out in the private sector and get just as good of jobs. They can't. Their whole life and livelihood is attached to Donald Trump. It has been for years. These guys exist politically, financially, professionally off Donald Trump. They're like those little fish that go around with sharks. What are they called? The pilot fish.
Right.
That's who these guys are, like pilot fish. They feed off the scraps that the shark leaves for them, when it feeds. That's who these guys are. When the shark dies, they die. So they know this, so they have to stay loyal.
This is probably a good moment to talk quickly about QATAR. I call this the QATAR pro-quo. I'm not sure what it is that QATAR has on Donald Trump or why there is this relationship. Maybe it goes back to Jared Kushner and his relationship. But we're now hearing that Trump is effectively giving QATAR NATO equivalent security clearance, guarantees, I mean. So QATAR is obviously not in NATO, but Trump has got their back. And he's also kind of involving them with the Israel and Hamas and Gaza situation. He'll bring QATAR in at any opportunity, not to mention being, on the receiving end of incredible gifts from this nation too. So what is going on here? Maybe I'll just play this clip first of him kind of talking about it, and we'll then make some sense of it.
And I want to thank the Prime Minister. It was fantastic. We agreed to launch a formal trilateral mechanism between Israel, Qatar, and the United States to begin a dialogue to enhance mutual security, correct misperceptions, and avoid future misgivings. And I want to thank Qatar, its leadership, and the Emir. He's a fantastic person. I think, I'm going to be his public relations man because I know him differently than a lot of people know him. But he wants peace. He wants to see peace. And his people, and they really acknowledge the critical role that they've played as mediator.
Yeah, well, Qatar's nowhere near Israel. So, I mean, just geographically, it doesn't make any sense to me.
So, yeah, there's a lot of shady stuff. So, Trump makes this big announcement of his 20-point peace deal to resolve the conflict.
Yeah.
So the reporting that is, and by the way, I read through it, and, the one that jumped out to me was item number 10, which talked about the Trump redevelopment of Gaza economic plan, which involves Jared Kushner and other people going in there. And we know that lots of people are going to be making a lot of money off that, including Trump and Kushner and others. So that one jumped out at me, along with several other things in the plan. But one of the things that was not announced, a couple things that was not announced that have come out after the fact today was, one, Bibi Netanyahu hated the plan. did not like the plan, did not want to go along with it, did not like a lot of things in the plan, and said that he wouldn't do it. And then Trump threatened him to withdraw all aid to Israel if he didn't agree to this. So that's why when Netanyahu gave the little line in the press conference of whether each side wants this to happen or not, this is going to happen. So, because Hamas has not agreed to this. People in Gaza have not agreed to this plan. This is yet another thing where Trump makes this big announcement.
Mm-hmm.
We've made a resolution. We sort of like almost like a tariff deal, a trade deal. And then the other side is like China. The other side is like, I don't know what you're talking about. We haven't agreed to anything. That's what's going on here as well. And so you have Netanyahu saying, well, this is what we're going to have to do. So it's clear that he doesn't completely agree with the whole deal. Hamas has said nothing. So that was one thing. So then we find out Qatar, who has leverage over Hamas, is getting this incredible, shocking, really, deal where the U.S. has agreed to extend to them the equivalent of NATO Section 5 protection. In other words, at the same time, Trump is saying he won't really honor Article 5 of NATO and protect countries in NATO from Russian aggression. He's not sure if he's going to honor that part of the NATO treaty at all. He's extending those same security guarantees to Qatar, which is saying that any country that does a military attack or strike on Qatar is the equivalent of them doing it against the United States, and the United States will respond with military force. However, so the big question is, most of the attacks on Qatar has come from where? Israel. It's been Israel strikes inside Qatar on Hamas and other groups. And so the big question is, does this security arrangement apply if Israel does a strike inside Qatar that is not against Qatari citizens? No, it does not apply in that scenario. Israel is an exception. They're allowed to attack people in Qatar without triggering this provision.
So the hypocrisy here is that Trump sees Qatar as a partner. He's claiming that he wants to end the war in Gaza, but Qatar is one of the biggest funders of Hamas. They've given them like $2 billion over the last few years, right?
And also of Donald Trump. So there's the other part.
So this is the crux here, isn't it?
That's the other part of this, is that Trump is building golf resorts in Qatar. He has numerous business deals where they are major investors. Let's not forget the Palace in the Sky jet came from Qatar, the gift that they gave him, which is not a gift to the United States. It's a gift of Donald Trump that he gets to take with him if he ever leaves office. So, yes, and you got Kushner over there making deals. You got Eric Trump over there making deals. The Trump and you got UAE buying $2 billion of Trump crypto. Literally,
follow the money.
Their main business partners is the Arab Middle East right now, Trump Org. Those are their principal business partners. And so they are doing things on behalf of the U.S. government to make those deals more lucrative and happen more often.
Caroline Leavitt was asked about this, and specifically Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. Didn't he get $2 billion deal done after Trump's first?
Well, that's from the Saudis, but
that was the Saudis. Right.
People focus on that. He's got a lot more since then.
Right.
I mean, that was just the starting point.
So it's ironic that Caroline Leavitt, we're about to see this clip where she claims that Jared Kushner is doing all this great work for America for free.
Yeah, he's a great patriot, right?
Great patriot. Here he is.
Second thing, how did the White House decide that it is appropriate for Jared Kushner to be working on matters that involve Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, 3 countries that combined have given him more than $2.5 billion for his investment firm?
I think it's, frankly, despicable that you're trying to suggest that it's inappropriate for Jared Kushner, who is widely respected around the world and has great trust in relationships with these critical partners in these countries, to strike a 20-point comprehensive detailed peace plan that no other administration would ever be able to achieve. And so Jared is donating his energy and his time to our government, to the President of the United States, to secure world peace. And that is a very noble thing. And this is a peace plan that has not just been accepted by Israel, but it has been applauded by Muslim and Arab countries around the world. It has been applauded by European leaders around the world. Virtually everyone in the world is supportive of this plan that Jared Kushner offered his time to help put together alongside our special envoy Witkoff, the Vice President, the President of the United States, Secretary Rubio, and the President's entire national security team. We are very proud of that plan, and we hope Hamas will accept it because it will lead to a more peaceful and prosperous Middle East.
Bullshit.
So, I've been screaming and yelling for reporters to ask about this stuff for a long time.
Right.
And you see, finally one does. And I think that's the first time that question's ever been asked. And, they get very upset and they start trashing the reporter because you can see here, this is a sensitive issue for them. How is it outrageous to question? You got Lutnick and Kushner involved in these negotiations who are, while they're negotiating like peace deals and stuff, at the same time are making business deals with the very same people. So we got AI technology going from the United States to UAE. We got UAE buying Trump crypto. We got Trump resorts. We got the Saudis giving Kushner money to invest. We got Kushner and Trump talking about going in and building resorts in Gaza. And it's outrageous to even question whether Kushner and Witkoff and Trump are doing this for ulterior financial motives. That's an outrageous question. Give me a break. Never in the history of the United States have we ever had envoys working on peace deals who are also making business deals with the people they're dealing with for their own personal gain at the same time. That's never happened before in U.S. history.
And they're working
so
alone.
To say that is outrageous to even question the propriety of that is outrageous in and of itself. And can I add one footnote?
Sure.
When does the Nobel Peace Prize, when did they make the announcement?
Isn't it November?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's typically the first Tuesday in November.
Okay.
So it just so happens that this big Middle East peace plan gets rolled out 1 month before that announcement. Don't think that is a coincidence, that Trump's obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize is not also coming into play here, as well as all the money.
I wanted to say that when Witkoff is going and doing these deals, and it was the same when, with the meeting with Putin and everything, they're all working alone. Like, they're not bringing, traditionally, that the State Department would send a whole bunch of support staff. And it's just not happening with these people.
They don't want witnesses.
They don't want witnesses.
They don't want witnesses about what's really happening in these meetings.
Yeah.
And I believe what's really happening is personal business deals are being made in the room along with political deals involving the United States government.
Well, who's paying for the ballroom? I mean, isn't there some talk that might be Qatari money as well?
According to Trump, he was, right? For
No.
weeks and weeks, he said, I'm paying for everything. Then we learn, because some of these things have to start being disclosed, then we learn, oh, no, it does not appear Trump is paying at all. It appears that all these private entities, businesses, CEOs, Trump's been shaking them all down. He didn't tell us, but now he tells us, oh, we've gotten money from all these different business groups and organizations, but he'd been lying to us for weeks saying he was paying for it because he doesn't want to admit that all these companies are kicking in cash.
Well, he doesn't pay for anything, ever.
No,
Didn't
we
even
all
pay for
knew.
Chick-fil-A.
As soon as he said he's paying for it, we all knew that was a lie because he didn't pay for. He didn't even pay for his own lawyers when he was being prosecuted for crimes. He was having the RNC pay his lawyers. He wouldn't even pay his own lawyers.
But he is giving his salary back.
He
Remember?
never paid Rudy Giuliani.
He's not taking a salary for being the president. So I mean, that is a great gift to the nation, isn't it?
He's doubled his net worth in 9 months.
Yeah.
Like, wrap your head around that. This is a man who was in business for how long? 50-something years and accumulated a net worth of what was estimated around 3-4 billion, right? He's doubled that.
Mm-hmm.
So in 9 months as president, he doubled his net worth.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the word corruption, which is what we are describing, right? Why is the word corruption not being really used at all? Because I don't hear it in hardly any of the reporting. And it's a perfect word to describe exactly what is going on here. This double dealing. And I think it's maybe a word and a construct that you and I and others need to start kind of focusing in on.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I think it was Reuters who broke the story about UAE buying the $2 billion in crypto,
Yeah,
and getting the AI. That was brought up, I think, one time to Trump. He yelled at the reporter, and I think that's the only time he's ever been asked about it. I think that was one of the shows where I was like screaming and yelling, ranting and raving, because I just can't believe.
yeah.
And you know what? Considering how she just treated that reporter who asked that question, that may be the last time anybody asks about Jared Kushner. And
Right. Well, that
his
reporter is going to be gone now. There's no way they'll have that reporter back again. And then that's how it works. Any reporter that is prepared
they
to
just
say
don't
these
call
things,
on him. They just won't call on him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's and the bottom line is, like, for those reporters, access is king. They want the access. And if they lose the access by asking tough questions, some of them choose not to ask tough questions. Not all, but some.
Let's talk about Stephen Miller being called a fascist by Gavin Newsom.
He's very sensitive about this.
Very sensitive. Now, I'm surprised, because I would have thought that he'd be like, yeah, I am. Come and get me. But he did kind of take it personally. Let's take a look.
It's deliberate. Yes. I mean, so, I asked the question, it was a rhetorical question, of course, why did Gavin Newsom say Stephen Miller is a fascist? It is a message that his team is sending to all the crazies and lunatics out there. And we're not going to absolve the Democrats of responsibility anymore.
The irony of talking like a fascist when trying to reject the claims of being a fascist is not lost on me.
Yeah, I mean, ever since the Kirk thing, he has been talking about rounding up Democrats, prosecuting. He's still done every day he's talking about.
Yeah, well, they're domestic terrorists.
That we're going to go after groups funding protest, funding Indivisible, which does the No Kings protest. Another one coming up, big one on the 18th, by the way.
Yes.
He wants to go after the groups that help fund some of these things, help organize some of these things. I mean, and, obviously they're going after everyone who didn't sufficiently mourn Charlie Kirk enough and trying to get them fired from their jobs and all that kind of stuff, or kicked out of the military or fired from government positions. So this is why Newsom, one of the reasons why, along with many other things, including ICE raids and all that, called him a fascist. But that was also done from the parody account, the Newsom press office account that makes fun of these people. So I really think how this all started was he was just making fun of Miller because Miller's favorite thing is to call Democrats fascists. He's done this for years.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the Newsom trolling account called him a fascist, Miller got all upset and said, and what he's saying there in that clip is that this is an incitement to violence.
Yeah.
That what Gavin Newsom is trying to get Antifa to kill Stephen Miller by calling him a fascist. Right? I mean, so what I did immediately was just go to Stephen Miller's Twitter account. Anybody can do this, and type in the word fascist on his search bar, and you will find at least 50 tweets of Miller over the last 3-4 years calling Democrats fascists, various Democrats, called Joe Biden a fascist many times. So it's like, if calling your political opponents fascists is incitement to violence. This is what Stephen Miller has been doing for years.
But it doesn't help that at Charlie Kirk's memorial hate rally, that he did a fascist speech word for word from a kind of fascist from history.
Exactly.
And he still gets upset when he's called a fascist. So as Newsom says, when Newsom kind of came back at him, and when he was like, why do you call me a fascist? He's like, because you're a fascist. And I think that, again, wouldn't it be great if all of the leaders in the Democratic Party were trolling Trump and Miller and all of these others in the same way that Newsom does?
Yeah, I don't know why they don't, because mocking them and making fun of them is the best, most effective.
But why
way
don't they?
And
why don't they?
I don't. It's just not. They're not comfortable doing it. They are more along the lines of like, that's not the way politics should be.
Yeah, those days are
right. And it's just they don't understand. Like, it's sort of like Schumer this week on the shutdown saying like, I think we can get some bipartisan agreement if we can come together and work together. And I think many Democrats are just like, does he think that this is like George W. Bush?
Yeah, business as usual.
Like, we are not dealing with the old Republican Party that he used to know and love, right? We are dealing with fascism. We are dealing with authoritarians
and criminals.
They want to crush us. They want to destroy the Democratic Party. They don't ever want they do not ever want a Democrat elected president ever again in the history of this country. That is where they're going at. And so you can't just treat these people of like, hey, we'll just sit down in a room and we'll hash things out and we'll compromise and we'll all shake hands and be friends. That's what so many Democrats don't understand, is those days are over. And it seems like a lot of the younger ones, Richie Garcia, Gallego, Jasmine Crockett, like, Goldman.
Yeah, they get it.
They get it. Chris Murphy, they get it. But a lot of the old guard doesn't get it.
And it's, excuse me, it's not just about crushing Democrats. They want to eliminate people of color, any people who have settled in the US, migrants, anybody who speaks out of turn. They want to punish women. They want anybody who have a minority group or LGBTQ+. This is not about politics, really, is it? Because, crushing the Democrats is relatively easy. But getting rid of effectively half of the country, people that they don't like. I noted earlier, I didn't say it at the time, but they, MAGA Mike Johnson kind of referred to real Americans. And this is a theme that keeps coming up. To them, real Americans are white men. And not poor ones either. They only like the wealthy ones.
The real American thing is Jim Jordan's favorite. He says that almost every day. Real America thinks that, real America believes this, as if the other half of the country is not a real American. That's what they do. But think about it. What they want is the Democratic Party to be a permanent fringe minority party that never acquires power in any way again. That's their goal. And you don't achieve that by like defeating them in a single election over issues. No. You achieve that at the visceral, the grassroots, the DNA molecular level by doing what you said, just going after universities, going after the voting systems, going after the media, going after mass media, like the networks. All of this stuff is designed to not just win the next election, but to try and ensure that Democrats never acquire political power ever again.
Yeah, it's about restructuring the DNA of America.
Yeah,
so exactly. It really goes. It's the nucleus is the problem, and
that's why they're always talking about taking over the culture.
Yeah,
taking over the entertainment industry, the music industry. It's all part of it.
We have to take a quick break, but we're going to spend our final time talking about this war meeting with Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, talking about Barack Obama's walk downstairs. We'll do that next here on Uncovered. When you start a podcast, it seems like you have to figure it all out on your own. Scripts and setup and filming schedule, logos. it can be super overwhelming, and every day seems to introduce a new decision that needs an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write podcast descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready to Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/uncovered. Go to shopify.com/uncovered. That's shopify.com/uncovered. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. So, these military generals, Ron, they were brought in from far away. I mean, there are estimates that it cost millions to convene all of these very senior military people in one place. Before we kind of look at what they said, or what Trump and Hegseth said, how strategically or how dangerous strategically is it to put everybody in one room like this? Because I would have thought our adversaries are going to be like, that is a great target, or now is a great time to do something that we've always wanted to do.
Yeah, it definitely was. But obviously, they did it at Quantico at a military base, which would be very difficult for any kind of terrorist attack. But yeah, stupid. I mean, when you listen, we all wondered, like, why would they bring them all here in person? There must be, we're all speculating. There must be some big reason that could be sinister, like loyalty oaths or whatever, to bring them here. But really, it turned out, there was some substantive stuff. I think definitely a key point was Trump softening them up as far as like accepting sending troops into U.S. cities. Mm-hmm. So that was a big part of it. But for the most part, it really wasn't about that, because Trump invited himself. He crashed the party after the fact. This was something Hegseth set up. So we were thinking, like, what is the big reveal? What is the big thing that Hegseth has brought them here for? And I was surprised that it was televised. I thought if it was going to be something really big and important and substantive and world-changing, they would have done it behind closed doors. They wouldn't let the public. But they televised. So I'm like, what could it be? Then we find out it's really just for him to sell his book. He wrote this book, The War on Warriors, and his entire speech was basically just going through things that are in that book. And he even mentioned, hey, all this is in my book. So it's like, what is he doing here? What is he trying to accomplish? Is he trying to impress these people with his ideas from his book? Because, I'm listening to these things and I'm thinking these generals and admirals have to think this guy is a complete idiot, what he's saying. Like, he's talking about trans people and tattoos and haircuts and drill instructors using corporal punishment on recruits and, doing away with rules of engagement. And knowing the military, these generals had to be sitting there thinking this guy is out of his freaking mind. So I think what it did was the exact opposite of what Hegseth was hoping. Hegseth thought they were all going to walk out of that meeting going, man, this guy is a badass, man. He really wants to kick ass and take names. We are going to be a whole different military now. Instead, they walked out of there thinking this guy is a lightweight who brings nothing to the table. He needs batshit crazy on top of it.
the lack of self-awareness from Pete Hegseth about how he is perceived, I think, is a really important thing here. Do you remember, like, months ago, we were talking about when Trump got elected and he was putting his cabinet together, and I said to you, what kind of a person does it take to accept a job that you're completely unqualified for? Now, you could apply this to a lot of the cabinet positions that Trump has created, including, Department of Education, where she thought AI was A1, for example. But when it comes to running the largest, most powerful military in the world, Pete Hegseth, if he was a true patriot, he would have said, I'll be involved, I'll be a spokesperson, but I can't run the military. It's just, right. I'm not qualified.
Give me a deputy position a little lower down on the food chain. Right. Make me secretary of the army or something.
100%.
Right?
If that's, but the reason that he is taking the job and then stepping up and calling all these generals talks to his mental health, talks to his narcissism, talks to the inflated ego that makes him a truly terrible person. And the fact that he just, as you said, he thinks that people are going to look at him and be like, yeah. And in fact, everybody was looking at him thinking, do we need a military coup right now?
Because they're all looking at him like, this guy's off his rocker.
Yeah.
I think one of the most important things was the lack of applause. Like, this is very important because Trump has gotten away, and Hegseth too, has gotten away of going into situations where there's junior military personnel. 19, 20-year-old kids, enlisted, not officers. And they've given these like applause lines or these, lines that are little thuggish, supposed to be humorous, and gotten some of the troops to laugh and gotten some of the troops to applaud. And because they bait them to do this. And young troops are very impressionable.
They're kids and they don't know any better, right?
And so they tried that this time and it didn't work. When Trump came in, they all stood at attention. Not one clap, not one cheer. It was silence. And Trump was taken aback by that. He's not used to entering a room like that, especially like where it's a military style people, where probably a lot of the people in the room even voted for him. I'm sure the majority did, because the vast majority of military officers are Republican. They just are. So, you have him walking in and it's silence. There's no applause, no nothing. That never happens to Trump. Then they all sit down. So Trump starts speaking and then, about a minute into his speech, he's like, you know what? You guys can applaud. You can cheer. Well, let's have some fun, is what he said. You can do whatever you want.
Enjoy yourself.
And they all just sat there, stony-faced, and looked at him. Not once did they clap. Not once did they applaud. Not once did they cheer for either one of them. And I thought that was the most powerful statement that was made, was the fact that they made it clear with their silence that they are not going to play this political game. They're not going to get sucked into politics, and they're just there to do their job for the country.
Yeah, it spoke volumes. And then when Trump started talking about the enemy from within, things started to get really quite dystopian. Let's take a look.
That's what it is. Only in recent decades did politicians somehow come to believe that our job is to police the far reaches of Kenya and Somalia, while America is under invasion from within. We're under invasion from within. No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. At least when they're wearing a uniform, you can take them out. These people don't have uniforms. But we are under invasion from within. We're stopping it very quickly.
So he effectively said that he would want them to take out American citizens and Americans and people living in the US, but because they're not wearing military fatigues, it's difficult to know which ones to shoot. I mean, this is the stuff of nightmares, right?
The theme of his entire speech was, for many decades, U.S. foreign policy and the U.S. military has been focused on foreign threats. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, and others. And what he's saying is that needs to no longer be the priority, because the main enemy is Democrats. The main enemy is Americans in U.S. cities, and so in primarily blue states.
And people of
And
color
what he's
and trans
telling
people
them
and women.
is that we are going to shift the focus from overseas commitments, and we are going to look inward. And what he's telling the U.S. military is, I'm going to use you. In other words, I'm not just going to use ICE and the FBI and the National Guard. I'm going to use the United States military. And he's telling these commanders this up front. And he's basically warning them, like, and Hegseth even said this, if you have a problem with anything you hear today, you can resign right now. So these are the messaging, which is, this is what we're going to do. And keep in mind, every single general in that room disagrees with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like 99%, there might be one or two that don't.
Mm-hmm.
But all the reporting says that they are extremely alarmed over the new Pentagon draft proposal on the National Defense Plan, which is what Hegseth has now got in the draft stages. He is completely reconfiguring our approach to national defense and defense around the world. And the reconfiguring is de-emphasizing helping to defend Europe, helping to defend Taiwan, the Middle East, and focusing the U.S. armed forces on the homeland and North America and South America. And that is it. And this is something that no one in that room agrees with. And so the question is, when the rubber, if Trump actually does do this and tries to use the Army, the Marines more extensively in U.S. cities instead of just National Guard, what are these guys going to do?
It's chilling, really, isn't it? Because I used the word dystopia earlier. That's what this is. This is what we have been warning of for almost a decade now. That Trump, when he is set free from the protections that held him back in 2017 for 4 years, that what we're dealing with now is an enemy from within called Donald Trump. And the reason that he doesn't care to protect America from foreign adversaries is because he's on their side.
Yeah.
And the allies, the former allies, Europe, I mean, this is all heading towards a withdrawal from NATO.
He views the main threat to the United States, which is him, as not China, not Putin, not Russia, Democrats.
Yeah.
Fellow Americans. We are the greatest threat. And that's what he needs to use the military, is what he's telling them. I need to use you to take on that threat. You don't need to be focused on Putin. You don't need to be focused on China. You need to be focused on Democrats in the United States. That's what he said over and over throughout his speech.
If this planet survives another 20 years, and sometimes I question whether it does, and it makes me very sad, and I really have been in the midst of quite a dark period personally throughout this. This is not why I moved to the United States. But I think that speech will be played in documentaries, like we look back at Hitler speeches. It'll be played in documentaries, the moment that Trump declared to the military that the enemy are U.S. citizens and is from within the country. I mean, this is pivotal in our history, in our timeline, and I'm desperately worried that because the news cycle moves so fast, that people will just move on to the next thing.
Well, and going back to Epstein, it's also why I've said before, I get a little frustrated with Democrats who only want to talk about Epstein.
Yeah.
Everything is a distraction from Epstein. Okay, it's not. Some of these other things are pretty damn important also. And I agree with you that we need to pay attention to all of it. We need to fight all of it. These things aren't all being done to distract from Epstein, as much as there are many people on the left who want to believe that.
Yeah.
These things are being done to radically transform society. It's not all about Epstein. Epstein is important. We talk about it. I write about Epstein more than anybody in media. We talk about it every week on this show, but it's not the only thing that matters.
Let's take a quick look at Pete Hegseth and what he had to say.
We fight to win. We unleash overwhelming and punishing violence on the enemy. We also don't fight with stupid rules of engagement. We untie the hands of our warfighters to intimidate, demoralize, hunt, and kill the enemies of our country. No more politically correct and overbearing rules of engagement. Just common sense, maximum lethality, and authority for warfighters. That's all I ever wanted as a platoon leader. And it's all my E6 squad leaders ever wanted, back to that E6 rule. We let our leaders fight their formations, and then we have their back. It's very simple, yet incredibly powerful.
That is everything we have ever known about military ethics turned upside down.
Oh, right.
He's saying that we want junior lieutenants, 23, 24-year-old kids right out of college, all gung-ho like dipshit here, and E6's staff sergeants. He's talking about now enlisted sergeants and lieutenants, junior ranked people with no seniority, to make life and death decisions on civilian casualties, bombings, and operations, and not be second guessed. He's saying, have your back. So all these rules of engagement, what are rules of engagement? They were developed post World War II because as we developed weapon systems that cause mass casualties. In other words, before in warfare, you killed the person in front of you. You had a musket, you had a sword, and if you were fighting the person in front of you, you weren't going to kill 100 other innocent people standing in nearby. But in World War II, we developed weapons of mass destruction that when you're trying to annihilate a military target, you have collateral damage that ropes in a lot of innocent civilians as well. So we developed a sophisticated series of rules post-World War II to try and ensure we can't always completely eliminate collateral damage, but to try and ensure that it is minimized as little as possible and that the junior soldiers follow those rules. And what Hegseth is saying is, you don't need to worry about those rules anymore. We're going to have your back. You are going to be able to commit war crimes and get away with it. And, one of the things that Hegseth got Trump's attention to years ago was when he lobbied for convicted war criminals to be pardoned. That was one of the first things that Hegseth did that got Trump's attention. And when you put that together with, we're going to send troops into American cities and use them against U.S. citizens, and if you violate rules of engagement and use excessive force and cause collateral damage, you won't be prosecuted. Put those two messages together. No more rules of engagement. We'll have your back. And we're sending you into U.S. cities against civilians. You have a perfect storm.
And the media have missed this because they thought he was talking about foreign theaters of war.
I don't.
And he's not.
I don't think so. I think what he's saying is when we send you into American cities, as we are going to do, as we've just told you, the rules don't apply. We'll have your back. If shit goes down, if you end up shooting civilians, if bad things happen, you will get away with it. We will not discipline you.
A lot of this seems to come from maybe historic trauma with him. Like he's bitter. He has a grievance about maybe something that happened to him or friends of his, and that
discipline.
Right.
Yeah, they were told things that they couldn't do. They got in trouble. A lot of people got in trouble in Iraq and Iran for Iraq and Afghanistan in the military for doing things that they weren't supposed to do. His whole book is about this. The war on warriors. That's the whole theme of the book, is that the higher ups, the military lawyers, the generals are always trying to get us in trouble for sexual harassment, for killing civilians, for torture. They're always looking to get us in trouble and tie our hands. And you need to let the warriors loose. You need to let them do what they need to do and stop tying their hands. It's basically like turning the U.S. military into Genghis Khan's horde, Mongolian horde, to rape, pillage, torture, and plunder.
I have that image of those U.S. Army guys urinating on prisoners of war. Do you remember that photo?
Yeah, well, it made me think of My Lai. The My Lai massacre with Lieutenant William Cawley, who they went in and massacred an entire village of civilians. And there was the controversial prosecution of him. He was convicted and sentenced to prison, but as I recall, he was pardoned by, I think, Nixon. And so it made me think of that. You're going to have Lieutenant Cawley's, what Hegseth is saying is I bet you if somebody asked him, and I would love this. Are you familiar with the case of Lieutenant William Cawley, the controversial lieutenant?
Yes.
Do you agree with many who say he should not have been prosecuted for that? I guarantee you Hegseth will say that the Cawley prosecution was wrong.
What's the timeline finally, Ron? How long do we all have to get the hell out of this country?
Where are we going to go?
I know.
That's a thing. It's like, I forget the famous quote was somebody said years ago, I think maybe Churchill. I think it was Churchill who said, all these other countries can have problems, coups, they can go under, they can fail, but the one country that can't is the United States. If that ever happens in the United States, then we all go under. The other democracies around the world, because the U.S. is the bulwark, it's the beacon, it's the pillar that holds up so much of the free world. If it falls, so much else falls with it. We're literally the one indispensable nation when it comes to freedom and economic freedom, political freedom, all of that. If the U.S. becomes authoritarian, think about the impact of that on Europe, and Canada, and the rest of the world.
I need to remind all of us that it's already happened. That we're not waiting for something anymore.
It's well underway.
It is underway because we're seeing the collapse in slow motion of the United States. We're seeing other nations, Canada and Europe, for example, working out their military strategies without the United States. We're seeing trading partners make plans for new trading partners, trading with China, leaving out the United States. This is underway. And, he's shrinking the workforce. This is the playbook of the authoritarian, where things will get so bad in the US that the only person that you can look to for help is the dictator. And Trump is positioning himself for that, and that's how he conquers 2028. This is written, and this is no drill. We have to finish, but Ron, thank you for battling through with your missing tooth. Thank you for your service. We shall return next Wednesday and bring you more Uncovered here on the Midas Touch Network. Thank you, Ron.
All right. See you next week.